Welcome to Something Personal. I'm Amy Laburda, the editorial manager at Palisades Hudson Financial Group. Those of you who listen to the credits of our show, and we appreciate those of you who stick around, have already heard the name Joseph Ranghelli. For those of you who haven't, Joe is our podcast director, editor, mixer, and co-producer, and he's been with us since episode 1. Today's episode is special because Joe has agreed to join me on the other side of the microphone, give us all a glimpse behind what goes into making the podcast you listen to. Joe is also the manager for community services at BRIC, a leading arts and media institution anchored in downtown Brooklyn. Joe, I'd normally welcome you to the podcast, but you've been here the whole time. So I'll just thank you for agreeing to chat with me today and give our listeners a look behind the scenes.
I'm always here lurking in the background. But thank you for having me.
So, Joe, I thought we'd start with the podcast since that's what we sort of jumped off of. You obviously wear a lot of hats here at Something Personal, as our listeners just heard. So could you just describe a little bit for people who aren't familiar with podcast or audio production, what exactly you do for our show and maybe a little bit how those different hats tie into your work?
It's funny because I feel like I've worked on other podcasts and I feel like because you're so great at what you do, I have less to do here. So thank you, Amy. But, during recording, usually before we get on, the part that the people don't hear is I'll speak to whoever our guest is for the day and just kind of let them know what we're looking for, sort of the flow of conversation and just kind of like direct it in that way. But again, Amy has already sent them sort of very detailed questions. So they're kind of prepared for that. And then during the show, I'll listen and just if anything comes up where I think, we may need to go back and retake something or do something. And again, it's a free flowing conversation. So we're not really like getting these like long retakes of stuff. But if it's like, oh, can you just like come back to the start of that question and maybe pick it up because like something messed up here or there. Sure. I'll look out for that, and I'm making notes sort of throughout just for the edit. But for me, at least on this podcast, I think where most of my work really comes in is in the edit because I feel like that's where I'm doing a lot of the directing, like moving pieces and different things like that. So I'll like use your questions as like a guide, but then it's also like, all right, how does it make sense for the sort of the flow of conversation that we actually got? So, and this is true for like film and stuff and television, but you find it in the edit. That's the phrase, right? So I feel like that's really where I get to shine here is finding it in the edit. And it's not only just editing, but like a cleaning up a lot of audio because for our podcast, one of the things that I feel like I try to do is have a very consistent sound. And that I think we have guests calling in from home in all these different areas. So there are variables we don't have control over. But one of the ways we approach our podcast is we send kits out to people that we've built because we wanted that consistent sound. And so, other than like the variables of like, ambient noise in the background or different things like that I will clean up in editing or in post, that's kind of how we approach it. So like I spec the kits and we built the kits and that's kind of hopefully a long-winded answer to what I do here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting for people who don't necessarily know, like none of us are really ever I say none of us are ever in the same place. We have had one or two.
Right. Yeah.
When I sat down with Gabe Fleischer season 2 and this season when, Melinda Kibler and Alex Cook were on, the two of them were together, though I was in a different place. So we do occasionally have people in the same place, but mostly we're all scattered across the country. Yeah. A lot of people, as you said, are recording from their homes. So there's a lot of things we can't control. I record from my house, so occasionally my neighbors decide to make some noise at the wrong time. So we appreciate Joe keeping us clean and crisp for your ears. I think today, obviously, different podcasts have different setups, but I always notice it as a fan of a podcast when it's clear someone's calling in on Zoom.
Right.
And sometimes that's the only way to get a person, and I understand that, but it's just less pleasant to listen to.
And I think different podcasts have different, ways they feel about it, right? Like that, they don't mind the like Zoom someone on their like earbuds or something like that. But for me, I knew I wanted that consistent like on mic sound. So that's why we make sure as best we can, everybody's using the same microphones and stuff like that.
So without calling out any other particular productions, you mentioned that this one is mainly an edit forward podcast. Other podcasts you've worked on, have there been differences? Have you been doing more upfront work? How's that flow gone for you?
Yeah. So I worked on a podcast for Brick, which you mentioned, where I work. We did a podcast called Art Moves, and it was a really cool podcast where we had these two people, one of which was a board member at Brick, and another friend of hers who worked in the arts in New York for decades. Yeah, and they were interviewing all these like people within the arts or arts organizations throughout New York. And we got some really, really great interviews. But with that podcast, it was very much like directing forward, because one of the things they wanted was, since there were two of them and they were very different personalities, both great in their own right, they wanted that direction between the two of them. So I was actually, while we were recording the episodes, I was actually in their ear, like with what you call an IFB, which you'll see sometimes on, like, say, like the Thanksgiving Day parade, right? They'll have the thing in their ear and they're being directed by somebody. So I was actually doing that during the podcast, like calling directions as we're recording and having conversations with people. So it was just very much like more in the moment directing, which I don't think we need for this podcast. It's because you drive it so well, and it's all sort of like just kind of curated before. And it's not that they came up with great questions beforehand, and a lot of that was happening, and I helped sort of mold some of that as well. But it was a lot of, all right, let's go to this person because, like, this person's maybe been asking too many questions, so let's go here, and so on and so forth. So, and then I worked on another podcast with a friend, which was not great, but we did a lot of episodes, and it was really cool experience. And that's actually where I learned a lot about the editing process of podcasts, because prior to that, my work was just like video editing. So it was cool to do that, just to like do like 40 episodes of us rambling, but like having to edit those.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of the learning for hosting for me has been learning by doing. Back in season 1, it was almost always just me and one other person, and always someone I knew because it was one of my coworkers here at Palisades Hudson. And now this season, we've had several episodes where we've had 4 people, including me on mic, which I have to imagine makes your editing job a little more complicated. But also just in the moment, you're trying to have what feels like a natural conversation, but also as the host, you're sort of, I want to keep it flowing. I want to, as you say, make sure people get chances to ask their question. No one feels dominated. So it's an interesting sort of part of your brain. And I really don't know, other than doing it, how to build that skill. Yeah. Well,
the one great thing we have here is, although we've had like you and other people from Palisades Hudson interviewing, say, an outside guest, you are the host, right? You're driving the conversation. With that podcast, we had 2 hosts who both kind of wanted to drive the conversation. So it was about making sure they kind of had their equal time, and that podcast was on WNYE, which is the NPR affiliate, and it was a really cool experience doing that. I did it for I think 3 seasons.
Nice. All right. Well, that actually brings us back to Brick, which I think is nice to explain for people who aren't familiar. So for people who aren't here in New York or don't know about Brick, what does it do? What role does it really occupy in the art scene here in New York?
Yeah, so Brick, or Brick Arts Media, people know us as Brick. We do a lot of different things. It's always kind of hard to explain, but we have, so we do Brooklyn Public Access Television, which is actually the division in which I work. And then we do, if you're from Brooklyn, a lot of people are familiar with one of the longest running concert series, I think, in New York, in Prospect Park, which is Celebrate Brooklyn. We do that. We also do Brooklyn Jazz Fest, but we also have at our location, which is 647 Fulton in Brooklyn, which is right next to BAM, which we're very close with BAM. Yeah, we have like art installations that we do there, and we support performing arts there. And it's a lot of different things. So Brick kind of wears a lot of hats. Sure. But on the television side of things, we have sort of 2 divisions. We have the community media, which is where I work. And then we have an in-house production team, which is called Brick TV. And I've done work with them too. But what they really focus on is, doing some docuseries stuff, and they do some scripted television and stuff like that. But so my day to day, I manage the production team for the community studio. So we have two large studios. We have one small mini studio, which I like to call sort of our one-man band studio. Yeah. We have a podcast studio, and we have editing suites, the whole shebang. Plus, we also have a bunch of like field equipment, cameras that we send out for production, and we support community media makers in creating their content. And it also airs on our channels. So we have 4 channels that we have that play all throughout Brooklyn, whether it be on Verizon and different cable providers, but we also stream all our channels online, so you can see it anywhere in the world. So which
nice.
Is
so
really cool.
I can link it in our show notes. For,
we can link. So I work with the production team, so I'm scheduling them. We're going through like weeks productions for the day, making sure that like we have people covering productions, but as well as like what gear's coming in. Yeah. In terms of like coming in and going out. It's a lot, but on top of that, we also do our own events. So we were talking off mic earlier about we do an award show for our community every year. So it's basically like people submit for different categories that we have, and we will present awards to people creating content for our channels. And it's a pretty big event. We do it in the ballroom here at Brick. It used to be live prior to COVID. We actually now do live to tape rather than live to air. But and that's more for a few reasons, logistics, some cost, but we do a red carpet for that. So it's a lot of planning. And this year, I've always kind of been really in depth, especially with the voting process and that goes along with that. But this year I'm the lead producer on that show. It's a lot of work.
Cool. Well, I especially appreciate you giving me a little more of your time than usual this week. It sounds like your plate is pretty full. So you've mentioned, and I think probably intuitively considering what you do now, that you come from a film background. So I thought if you didn't mind, maybe we could share a little bit with our listeners what your educational background looked like, how that led into your early career, what you initially did with it.
So I went to Brooklyn College, which has a terrific film program. And actually, one of the things I love is, at least when I was there, it was one of the things that we did, at least at that time, was we shot on film, which was really cool. Like, it was mandatory. You had to shoot on film. So That's got that experience of not only shooting on film. So we start with Super 8, sort of low stakes, and then you move up to 16. And we had even some people who did their thesis films on 35, which is extremely expensive. I did not do that. But you had to at least shoot on Super 8, 16 millimeter. And then not only that, but splice it, like get it processed, bring it in. They had the old like steam back editor, and you were like in there splicing, and it was an amazing experience. Being able to do that, like really hands on. I went there and I studied film production and with like a focus on directing and. But you kind of get everything that comes with it. You get the film studies courses, so it was just kind of like swallowed up in it. And as a film lover, it was a great experience. And it's funny because when I was there, now Brooklyn College has their master's program, which is on Steiner Studio, and they have the biggest sound stage on the East Coast dedicated to a program. And that wasn't there when I was there. I kind of wish I was there to get that experience. But it just shows you like they took like very large steps in the 2000s, sort of putting their name up there with like the Columbias and the NYUs and stuff like that. And we got to work with a lot of them. Like I did focused on audio after I graduated. I not only doing the PA work, which I feel like everyone does, because it's like, let's get on a set and see what it's like. But I focused on audio, so I worked on a lot of like NYU, Columbia thesis films, New York Film School, stuff like that. But so it was a really cool experience at Brooklyn College. I went there. I don't know, a lot of our listeners probably won't know, I am a twin. And my brother and I are both passionate about film. So we actually went there together and studied there and worked on all our productions together. So it was just a really, really cool experience. And then after graduating, like I said, I went into freelance work. So I was doing a lot of PA work, which is production assistant work for anyone who's not familiar. And that's the grunt, the lowest of the low. I remember just working like crazy hours. I remember doing like an 18-hour overnight for like, that was on it was actually a film called All Good Things with Ryan Gosling.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which was really cool for me because like at that time, like working on that film, the film takes place over a number of years, and we were doing something that was set in the 80s. So they were doing like 80s Times Square, but they turned a street on like 38th into like 80s Times Square, and we got all the old vehicles and stuff. So it was really cool to like get to work with people like sort of the props masters who like deal with that stuff. But so I did, but I focused on a lot of audio and sort of built a reel and built my own gear, and eventually did a lot of work that way, working with several companies. Doing a lot of like small commercial things, a lot of like pharmaceutical video, in-house stuff like that. Just kind of making your bones. And then I also actually worked with a company called Milk Studios, which they had a location on the west side. I don't know if they still do, but that was really cool because I got to work on a ton of commercials throughout New York, but like in a lot of different ways. And I also worked with a company. It's funny because we're talking about wearing a lot of hats,
right?
Because I wanted to like work and kind of be on set a lot. Though sound was kind of like what I focused on, and like I had put a lot of money into building a package. I knew I wanted to direct, so I did some like small assistant director things here or there, but I also would like do like grip work. So if you're not familiar, that's like working with lights and different things like that. So I worked with a company called Turnkey HD, and they had like a grip van, but that was really cool because like I worked on like The Voice, right? So like The Voice which is funny because like I don't watch The Voice, so like I never saw any of the people that we worked with, but it was like cool to like do that and like in that capacity. And then like House Hunters, just all the different kinds of things that come into New York. And I feel like people take different paths in film. They either are like, all right, I'm going to like focus on this one thing and I'm going to be the director, and it's just got to happen that way. Right. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I was like, I want to do that, but I also want to work. So I kind of bounced around and did a lot of that. And then eventually found my way to Brick, where I actually started with them in the equipment room. So I was like working with equipment, and I feel like all that experience of like not, doing sound, doing lighting, working with cameras, even though I didn't do a lot of camera work, I did some here or there, really helped me there because I was able to kind of like hop in. And even though I wasn't in a television studio background, I was still able to apply a lot of what I had learned to that. And I only did that for about a year with them before I moved into operations, where I was then like researching and ordering new gear and things like that. And then that eventually rolled into the position I'm in now, where I manage the team.
Yeah. So I think it's been clear from talking to you and even from knowing you outside the podcast that you have deep New York roots. But you have to
ask. You can hear it in my accent.
It's not what I meant, but not no. But I think you got to ask a film enthusiast and a film education background person. Did you ever consider going out to California? Obviously, New York has a thriving film scene. You didn't have to, but was that ever on the table, or did you kind of know you wanted to stay here?
It's funny because California got tossed around, but I never really entertained it. But oddly enough, the place I did think about for a little bit was Austin, Texas, which people be like, what? But there was a moment in the like sort of early aughts, like where Texas was like blowing up. If people know, there's Alamo Drafthouse theater, if you're familiar, but there were a lot of filmmakers that had kind of gravitated there, like your Robert Rodriguez,
you got South by Southwest going on.
South by South. So there was a little bit of a come up moment, and I knew I had a friend who was a cinematographer who went out there for work, and he was doing well, and he had mentioned, hey, they don't have audio guys out here. Yeah. So for a brief moment, I entertained going out there. I had been out to Austin a couple of times and really liked it. So I was like, maybe give it a year, see what it's like to work out there. Yeah. But it didn't happen. Yeah. And it ended up going out. But I will say that California, it just never really appealed to me. And I felt like different focuses, right? Like if you want to act, you go out to California, right? Not that there isn't acting in New York, right? If you want to act in film, right. A lot of television acting in New York. But I have a good friend who's done like everything. He's been on like every Marvel show that was in New York. He's been on like multiple Law and Orders.
Of course, Law. I feel like it's for people who don't go to a lot of theater here in New York. The running joke is everyone's bio includes Law and Order because it's just an engine keeping our actors employed.
We texted him. We were like, we knew you made it when he was the cold open that found the dead body. He was the guy that found the dead body. We were like, you made it.
Amazing.
But so California just wasn't really something that interested me. But and there was just plenty of work in New York.
Yeah, fair enough. So speaking of your directing aspirations, I know about 6 years ago, you released a short film called Chill, which I've seen. I enjoyed very much. And I just wondered if you would mind talking a little bit. What was the process? How did you come to get attached to that project or develop that project? And what was it like making that film? So
some of the listeners may know, Ali Elkin also works on this podcast. And we are married. She wrote a really good script. I don't want to like give too much away because like maybe we'll link it so people can see, but it's the basic gist is it's like a bachelorette party that kind of goes wrong. And so we would just, both of us worked in the industry and we were like, why don't we just make this? Like, why don't we get it done? So we, Ali wrote and we co-produced and I directed. And one of the cool things about like working freelance and also like having gone to school like in New York with a lot of people who are like still based in New York is I knew I can tap a lot of people to work on the thing.
Sure.
And when you're making a short film, you kind of have to do that. It's just the way it is. But we do it in turn. Like so for instance, my editor, which is a good friend of mine, Marco, I assistant directed his short, and he used all my sound gear for his short, and my brother worked on his short as well, and then I work on my brother. So it's just kind of like it's like round robin. We all work on each other's projects. So
even years ago, I have a theater background from school and college for people who don't know, and I got pulled in to do a little ADR for a film once because I was the only person the director knew who spoke any French. I was like, I'm not a native speaker. He's like, it's not important.
Right, just as long as you can make it sound good.
So I think it's really, let's just pull the network. Let's find who we know.
So like my cinematographer is a good friend of mine as well, but he is a working cinematographer in New York. It's not like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. So he came with his own camera and package and gear, which was amazing for us. So we shot most of it in Vermont, in a house in Vermont. And it was a really cool experience, which kind of came with its ups and downs. Yeah, mostly due to weather. but we had a really good experience, like going up scouting stuff, and then we. The funny thing is we shot the thing in 2019, we edited, and then when we finished the editing, we submitted to festivals, and we started making some festivals, which was really cool. But we made our festivals in 2020.
Yeah, for those doing the math of 6 years ago.
Exactly. Right. 6 years ago, you do the math. Yeah. So the first festival we made was a festival, which is, so we were just not, because this thing had a sort of a dark comedy vibe, we were submitting to a lot of like genre festivals. So if you're not familiar, that's stuff that maybe is like horror, sci-fi, fantasy focused.
Right.
So we made, the first festival we made was a festival called Horror Hound, which is actually a pretty big genre film festival, and it's in Cincinnati. So we were like ready to go. We were, tickets, everything like that. And then COVID hits. Like literally the week we were going is like when everything starts shutting down. So it kind of like all the festivals stopped, regrouped, did a lot of stuff virtual, and which was still really cool. But the first one we actually got to go to, which actually was probably the biggest one we made, was a festival called Film Quest, which again, one of the largest genre festivals out there. And we got to go out to they do two. They do one in Utah, and they do in Provo, Utah, and they do one in LA. And we got to go out to the Provo, Utah one, which was an amazing experience. We met a lot of really cool people there. And oddly enough, this year's Oscars has two films that played Film Quest this past year, which
interesting.
is really,
I have a guess,
really cool.
But which two?
I don't remember. I just know because I'm part of the like sort of alumni email, so I saw like the announcement. But
gotcha. I'll look.
We
it
can
up.
link them in the link them in the notes. I apologize. I did it. I don't remember the titles, but yeah, two films that played that festival are actually nominated, and actually a third one was on the short list, but didn't end up getting a nomination. So yeah, it was really cool to like to make that. And actually, I'll throw in a little shout out for Allie. She was nominated for her script at Film Quest because they do an awards night for that. And then we actually won an award. We won the like jury prize for a festival called No Coast Film Festival out in Emporia, Kansas, which was really cool. And I got to go out and see like our film played in like this grand old theater, which was like amazing. And then unfortunately, we made several festivals, but the last festival, several others, but the last festival we made was the first one we made in New York, was the New York Short Film Festival, which I'm very familiar with. I had gone to like when I was younger, and I was going out of town my brother and I were going out of town for our 40th birthday. We were going to Europe. So I didn't get to go to that one, the last one we made. So Allie went and repped us for that one. But it was but it was a really, really cool experience. Directing is a passion. I love doing it. And the only reason we haven't done something since, for our listeners, is we've had kids. So we've kind of had to like slow things down a little bit, but it's not, and we're not saying never again, but we just kind of have to, when the time
your hands
is right.
are full right now.
When the time is right, we will work on getting another film made.
Well, I believe Chill is currently on Vimeo. I think it's still out there, so I will link that for people who want to see it and commend it to them. And we'll keep an eye out for eventual future projects.
We have ideas, and we're working on stuff, but you have to wait for the timing to be right, and just kind of.
Well, one more thing you have on your plate that I haven't mentioned yet is that you're a member of the National Board of Review. So I wondered if we could just briefly touch on what the board does for listeners who aren't familiar, and maybe a little bit of your experience as a member of that organization.
Yeah, so first, the National Board of Review is like the oldest film society in America. It's been around for over 100 years. They actually used to do a magazine that's like was really cool. You can still find some of them like eBay and different things like that. But it's basically a New York-based organization that is comprised of filmmakers, just students, people in the industry. And so I got there through Brooklyn College, actually. A screenwriting professor of mine got my brother and I in 2007. He got us in there as student members, so we were getting some limited screenings, and it was amazing because with these screenings, we get Q&As with directors and writers and actors, and it was really cool to just be able to do that. And eventually, after having done it for a few years as student members, we became official voting members in 2009. And so since 2009, I've been a voting member of the National Board, which means similar to like what people probably know of the Oscars, we see all the films throughout the year, and then we pick the best. So we'll do a top 10 of the year, and then we have a number one of the year, and then we pick actors, so on and so forth. And one of the cool things is we usually, national board, now people will look for this hopefully, but we're usually the ones who get the ball rolling in award season. So we're like the first out of the gate. Here's our best, and then right after that, everything starts like just going full steam. So the other cool thing is I'm also part of the student grant committee for the national board. And that's actually amazing because we get to screen student thesis films from not even just New York. We will do some colleges outside of New York, but we get to screen. So like NYU, Columbia, Brooklyn College, City College, and we screen all the thesis films that they submit to us, and we will award student filmmakers, a national board prize, which comes with some money, which is very nice after you've just made a thesis film. And you're probably a little strapped, but also you're probably thinking about making another thing. So, we love to be able to like move that forward and be able to say, hey, here's for your next project. But also they get a student membership to the national board, which is really cool, which I always say when I've gone out, because they asked for a couple of years, I went out and gave the award at Brooklyn College as an alum. And I always said, the membership is more important, trust me, because you're going to meet people. And like my all-time favorite filmmakers, I've met Spielberg, I've met Scorsese, which is my number one. I've met, so I've gotten to meet like all these people through the national board, which has just been a really, really, and some of them multiple times. So it's like some of them. And then we also have an awards gala every year that I've gone to every year since 2007. And it's an amazing experience. So it's, but we see everything. We try to narrow it down, which is always very hard, especially when you're a film lover, and pick your favorite films of the year. So,
Yeah. I mean, okay, so while we're talking about awards, I'm going to take our listeners with us, hopefully on a journey they enjoy, in that we're recording this a few weeks before the Oscars. I know the National Board of Review comes first because I'm a weirdo who likes to follow. Like, I'm the one at our Oscar party who's like, well, this film won the Producers Guild of America, so I think it's got good chance. I'm doing the gaming, which would be helpful if I were with other film friends. The friends I watch Oscars with, like, don't really.
Right, don't care.
It's just me. But I guess for our listeners' context, I do not have the kind of film background you bring. I have enthusiasm and like a couple history of film classes from college. So mainly just a love of the genre. But I thought maybe we'll chat Oscars for a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I love talking movies. And honestly, the people that don't go to film school tend to know more about movies than people who go to film school, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I will try not to feel embarrassed by lack of credentials then. So this year, one of the first things I noticed when they announced the nominees was actually not any of the nominees initially, but just the number 98. We're coming up on a really significant milestone for the Oscars. So I guess before we jump into our bigger conversation, I wonder, as a film lover and someone who's worked in the industry, I know a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about the Academy Awards. Some people really enjoy the tradition and sort of the pageantry. Some people are like, they're overblown. People get too focused. People are in the middle. So I was just wondering what your relationship with the Oscars is like.
It's funny because I have like a really love-hate relationship with the Oscars. So as a kid, I loved it, right? It was always like, oh my God, like movies. I love movies, like this celebrating movies. And I could always like see oh my God, like how cool it would be to like be up there. But then once I started like really studying film and like really like just learning a lot more about film, and I see what like the Oscars does not nominate, it drives me up the wall. It's a little bit of a love-hate, but that said, I still watch it every year. And it was funny because it wasn't until when I went to college that we had these friends that like the Oscars was kind of like the Super Bowl. We all get together, we have like pizzas, and we're like watching the Oscars. And we're all complaining about it the whole time, like, why didn't they nominate this? But we still watch it.
I think the Super Bowl people do the same thing. They're why is this happening? But that actually brings me to an interesting point. I read that after 2029, the Oscars are going to be fully on YouTube and not on terrestrial TV anymore. Now, obviously, the Oscars existed before TV was even invented.
Right.
You know, TV is not fundamental to the Oscars. But I think growing up, I had that sense, too, where it was like this big cultural event. Even people who didn't care about movies the rest of the year would talk with me about movies around the Oscars. So I'm curious if you think, you know, as someone who works in TV now, like, do you think that that's becoming less of a cultural institution as, like, you know, sort of things are fracturing apart a little more and people are getting in their silos? Or do you just think it's that so many people are used to watching things on streaming that, like, what TV has kind of just, you know, become a little less meaningful as a benchmark?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I think it's because, you know, and the numbers have been dwindling for the Oscars on TV. So I think it's kind of like meet them where they're at, right? Like, after everybody's on YouTube, like, while our thing's airing on an ABC or whatever, like, why not have it on YouTube? Now, you know, it'll pop up probably first thing when you sign on and it's there. I'm a little sad to see it go, you know, but I was also, you know, I missed the days of, like, Billy Crystal doing the Oscars, and those haven't been around for a long time. So
people our age will always remember Billy Crystal's, like, propeller guy, Gilligan's Island, Titanic bit. Like, you know, it was a staple of a certain generation's childhood for sure.
Yeah. So and it hasn't been like that for a very long time.
Right.
So, you know, though it's a little sad, I'm not super, like, I'll still watch it on my TV because I have a Roku. So YouTube will be on my TV, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I think it's more of a, like, meet them where they're at. Like, where numbers are dwindling, why not? Not do that?
I mean, I guess I'm part of the problem in that, you know, my friends and I watched it on Hulu last year, which like this year it double streamed. Although famously in 2025, the Hulu broadcast ended mid Best Actress speech and didn't include Best Picture. So it was kind of an anticlimactic end to the evening. They haven't quite ironed it out yet for streaming.
It's so funny. So I have YouTube TV, so I was watching. Actually, at that time, I don't remember which subscription we had, but we were watching it. I don't remember a cutout on my end, but I do remember a friend of mine in Puerto Rico who was watching it was like, "Who won Best Picture?" He was like texting us. And that was an old film friend who used to watch it here, but he moved back to Puerto Rico, and so he had the interruption, but it wasn't an issue for me in the time. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, that did happen.
Well, and, you know, not to get too far down the rabbit hole with streaming, but, you know, now there's like, oh, were you streaming ABC through a streaming service versus were you using the Hulu stream? Like, it's, you know, I think sometimes people get a little frustrated, and I understand why, where they're like, I just want to turn on the TV and see the Oscars. Why?
So we cut the cord and we do the YouTube TV as our cable, but it's funny because, like, with our kids, they, you know, sometimes something they want to watch isn't on a streaming service, which happens a lot now, which is a big issue I have with streaming services. Right. And why I'm a physical media guy. but so we've been going to, like, a lot of, like, Pluto TV and Tubi. And the funny thing is that's cable, right? Like, they're like, it's free. We'll do commercials, because they were like, you know, we gave up a cash cow. Let's go back to that. Like, let's go back to this commercial space for everything. So, and then it's funny to see how, like, our kids react to the commercials, which now I think they like, but early on first, it was like, what is this? I want to watch my thing. But it's just funny how, like, even through the streamers, you're kind of going back to what cable was, you know?
Yeah, they're solving the same problem in a new way, I think. So while we're talking about changes coming to the Oscars, I wanted to flag that on the 100th Oscars, we're finally adding stunt design, which I think is hugely overdue.
Way overdue.
RIP to the entire cast of the Mission Impossible series, because they wrapped up in 2025 just a couple years too early.
Soon. Just missed it.
But this year we have casting as a new Oscar for the first time, which I'm very excited about. I don't have any particular insight as to, you know, how that will break. I think I'll be interested to see who takes the first one home. But I was just wondering, as a film history person, as a film enthusiast, how do you feel about, like changes to the Oscars? Do you think Oscars often change too slow? Do you think that there'll be any other big changes that have been, I know stunt has been in the pipeline, it feels like forever.
Right.
So
I like changes as long as the changes and some people don't get their, acceptance speech aired.
Right.
I don't like that change because I feel like all these people should have their moment. But yeah, like you, stunt performers should have been on here so long ago. And it's my brother and I used to have an argument with a friend who he just for whatever reason was like, why should that be there? Stunt performer. He was like, what's next? They're doing Best Kiss? Like I was like, what? But it's like these people work so like half the movies we love like don't exist without these stunt performers. And I don't remember, are they lumping in choreography with that as well?
I have not read that, but they might be. Honestly, I feel like choreography should be recognized whether there or elsewhere for sure.
I think it should be separate if you're asking me, but at least if they're getting recognized to start in the one category, that's fine.
Yeah.
And even something like casting, like you have these movies that like had these amazing casts, which I think Sinners has a very good shot this year. But
I'm pulling for Sinners, but we'll see.
But these people again, the movie doesn't exist without the cast. Like, why should this person not be recognized? So I love the addition of those two awards, and as long as those people accepting those awards get to have their acceptance speech on air, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah. Well, since we mentioned Sinners, I got to shout out the new record holder for nominations.
Yeah.
I was so delighted because I think, it came out much earlier in 2025 than a lot of things that are often gunning for awards. Yeah. And I remember I saw it in the theaters and I was like, oh, I hope this gets remembered. And, obviously it did in spades, at least on the nomination level. Right. I was curious if you had any thoughts about, you mentioned even with your short films, genre films are often kind of like put in their own little, bubbles. Bubbles. Right. So I was curious as to if you thought there were any particular attributes that Sinners had that helped it break through. Is it just, it's such a good film that people could not deny its quality? Or was there any sort of factors in 2025 where you feel like people are loosening up a little bit about that?
I wish the Academy was loosening up. So the genre films, especially horror, has always been sort of neglected by the Oscars. In fact, I think this year there are what they say 3 horror films. I think only 2, because they're considering Begonia, which I don't think is a horror film personally, but but Frankenstein as well got a nomination. So people are saying, oh my God, like I think they're amazing films, and I think that's partially why, but I think it's also sort of the pedigree behind them. I think, Frankenstein has Guillermo del Toro, and Sinners has Ryan Coogler, who had already been nominated for the first comic book film to be nominated for Best Picture, because Batman never was. So with Black Panther, and he had already done Creed, and he has a pedigree behind him. So I think that helps. Yeah. I hope we're seeing a little bit of a sea change in like how that goes. Yeah. I personally don't think it's going to happen. I think next year we'll see the same sort of stuffy things get nominated. Yeah. But maybe I'm wrong. One of the really cool things, though, is seeing Amy Madigan get nominated for Weapons, which I love. Now, the film itself didn't get nominated for anything else, which I think is a crime, but I love seeing her get nominated for supporting actress, because she was incredible as Aunt Gladys. So, agree. And I think you're right, too, that it's not the kind of performance you often see the Oscars recognize. No, not at all. Not at all. So, so it was just amazing to see that, and like to see her sort of like through all the award shows has been really cool. But yeah, I mean, Sinners is probably in my top 3 this year. It's an amazing film, I think. But I think it had a lot going for it. You had a terrific director behind it who made a terrific film. He had a little bit of an Oscar pedigree with having been nominated before. And it's funny because, like you mentioned, it was released earlier in the year, but there was a lot of hype behind it. Like people were saying, oh, this film is going to be so, like, I remember being like, man, they're releasing this pretty early. Like you want something that might, but I feel like Warner Brothers didn't necessarily think it would have the legs for the Oscars, and they were wrong.
Yeah. And thank goodness. I was truly, it was one of my favorites of the year too. I think it was just so tremendous. And it was so funny. I remember talking recently to a friend who was asking why they were nominated for visual effects. And I was like, there were two Michael B. Jordans in the movie.
Two Michael B. Jordans.
And,
and honestly, a lot of that, a lot of people don't realize a lot of the background is CGI'd in. Like there's a lot of that old South that's like in there was added. Yeah. It just looks amazing.
It's just so seamless that you know, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, it feels like, of course it's that way, because it's just so lovely in how it's done. Which actually also brings me to, we talked about the joy of physical film a little bit earlier in this conversation, and I think 2025 is a really interesting year for film nerds in formats specifically, because Ryan Coogler, for people who don't know, released a little explainer on YouTube when Sinners came out, walking audiences through how it was shot and the many different ways you might be able to see it depending on where you live and what you have access to, which was wildly popular to my surprise.
It was all over Instagram. It was great. I loved it. I was like, yes, teach him, Ryan.
But I think too, you know, obviously Coogler has been a longtime film enthusiast, has always had sort of an eye on education of audiences. But it wasn't only that. You know, we had One Battle After Another, which is another front runner, released and shot in VistaVision, which, you know, a vintage format. I remember I was lucky enough, since I live here in New York, to see it also projected in VistaVision. And I was like telling people about it, and the number of people who were just like, what is VistaVision? I was like, oh, I got to pick my audience a little better. But, you know, this sort of classic physical film format looked terrific. I think even a few years ago, Oppenheimer's release in 70 millimeter IMAX, hugely popular. People were driving hours to see it. So I'm just curious, I think for people who aren't like you and me and already into this, like, why is that interesting? And I guess B, do you think that we're going to see more of a split? I think there's people who are like, I'll watch everything at home. Everything's comfortable in my living room. And people who are like, oh no, I can't see 70 millimeter IMAX other than an IMAX, and sort of making the event of going to the theater more of an event.
Right. Well, first, like, I'm glad you mentioned VistaVision, which I also saw the projection in Vista. It was funny because I had my screening through the National Board, which had a Q&A and all that, but I hadn't looked to see where it was. So I was like, when they announced, oh my God, there's only 3 cities doing the VistaVision, London, New York, LA. I was like, I got to buy tickets. And then I was like, wait a minute, let me check my, and I look and I'm like, yes, we're doing the VistaVision screen. So I got to see it. But it's funny that you mentioned VistaVision, because VistaVision was sort of born of the studios wanting to combat television, right? They thought, oh my God, TV, what is this new thing? Like, it's going to destroy us. So, like, let's do this large format spectacle. And it's funny that, like, it's come back in that way, right? Like, how do we fight the streaming services and get people back to the theater? VistaVision. Yes. But and it's funny because I had seen an article, because people were like, oh, One Battle After Another, first film projected in VistaVision in 60 years. And people were like, well, no, wait, because the Brutus was not actually projected in VistaVision. It was shot in VistaVision and then projected in 70 millimeter. So, but yeah, I think during the whole press circuit, DiCaprio said something like, will movie theaters become like jazz bars, where they're like very, you know, few and far between, and kind of like the people who love it will go to it. And I really hope we don't get there. Like, I pray to God we don't get there, the film lover. But I think it's like a niche thing, right? Like they if you can see it on film, like, and it is the best way to see it. I know you'll have the people who are, you know, the best way to see it's on my couch, and you know, but nothing beats seeing it projected on film. And I think that's sort of the resurgence of this is after COVID, when the numbers were dwindling, they were like, no, wait, film is important. So let's do this large format, projected on film, remind people like why you want to actually go to the theater. And obviously, you know, Christopher Nolan has been a huge backer of this, and he's been doing this. The Odyssey is going to be shot all in 70 millimeter, which is or in IMAX, which is incredible, and I'm very excited for it. And I was one of those people who drove some hours to see Oppenheimer because all the screenings sold out, even the extra ones. So, but
yeah, I was actually very lucky because one of the places showing 70 millimeter Oppenheimer was Indianapolis, where my parents live. So that was how I got around all the New York screenings selling out. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously not everyone has access to some of these specialty screenings, but I do think it is a really unique experience if you can make it work. And I think, you know, in fairness, there are directors shooting digitally who are also real champions of the theater experience. You know,
sure,
immediately think of James Cameron with the Avatar films, which are really a series that are meant to be seen in a huge format immersively. So
it's not just the people shooting on film for sure. But I think it's just another way to here's why you really want to see it on the big screen. But again, do you want to see Avatar in 3D in an IMAX, or do you want to see it on your tiny TV or something?
Or you know, God forbid, your phone. Please, please don't watch Avatar on your phone.
Listen to us now. Don't watch Avatar on your phone. But and it's funny because I'm not a huge fan of that series, but I've seen everyone in theaters because I love kind of what it brings to the theater experience, and they are a spectacle from a script standpoint. I'm not a huge fan of them, but they are a spectacle. And it was like I saw Fire and Ash and was visually just like blown away by it.
Totally. You know, I think obviously both of us watch things on streaming. We're not like saying you can never watch it another day, which actually brings me to, I'm curious, as a National Board of Review member and someone who votes for an award, this year the Academy has instituted a new rule that members have to watch everything in a given category if they're going to vote for it. All the finalists, not the full short list. This was always the case for certain categories, but it's now everything. Right. You know, as a lay person, that feels fair. That feels right to me. But I wonder, as someone who is dealing with the logistics of voting for something, are there downsides, or is this just kind of like, you should have been doing this anyway, but now we've made it a rule for you?
I'm of the you should have been doing it anyway. I know that in my process, I can't speak about other people and I won't speak about other people, but in my process, I won't vote for anything I haven't seen. So I'm not, I want to be fair, sometimes, and I try to see as much as I can. And with my family, sometimes it's hard for me to get to some things, but I'll watch the screeners and do different things like that. So I would have hoped that people, especially for the Oscars, were doing that. But I know the Hollywood Reporter last year did a bunch of interviews with people, anonymous interviews, I believe, where they were saying, I didn't see this thing, but I voted for it or I didn't vote for this because I thought this guy had an Oscar and he didn't actually have an Oscar. So it's like, that should not be the thought process behind this stuff. It should be the work. So that's just the way I've always approached it, and I hope now the Oscars will do the same thing down to implement. Sure. I don't know how they're going to police that. I mean, so I did read that the screeners they're providing, they track what you've seen, but of course you can attest, I saw this at a festival. You can say I saw it here when you really didn't.
But I think publicizing the expectation at least is hey. I think the Hollywood Reporter, I also remember reading that article, and I think there's sometimes a culture that's like, no one's watching all of them. It's not a big deal. And now at least they're like, no, you should be. Right.
And I get it, right? There's sometimes I can't get to something because of my schedule, and I'm not, a super busy, producer who's bouncing all over the world, making movies. So I understand, schedules. Yeah. But just don't vote for something. Don't say, I thought this guy had an Oscar, so I'm going to vote for this thing. Right. And it's just kind of defeating the purpose.
So technical merit aside, to the extent that you can separate it, I'm just curious, do you have a film that in your heart, emotionally, you are pulling to win Best Picture this year?
It's funny because my favorite film of the year wasn't nominated.
Okay. I'll take that one too.
Which I think is great. So my favorite of the year is actually Park Chan-wook's No Other Choice, which I thought was brilliant. But he has this history with the Oscars where he has no history. They don't nominate him. He's made a bunch of amazing films that have never been nominated. So I'm not surprised. But his film is probably my favorite film of the year. But I would say I loved Sinners and I loved One Battle, so I'm kind of up for either one winning. I will say this, having been voting for a long time, you kind of see where the tides are going. And right now it looks a lot like a lot of things are moving in One Battle After Another's favor. Yeah. So the way here's what I think is going to happen, or at least a number of things need to happen. So if Ryan Coogler wins director, then I think Sinners is 100% taking Best Picture as well. Yeah. I think if Ryan Coogler wins screenwriting, but not director, then I think One Battle After Another will win Best Picture. That's kind of just from like years of watching not only the Oscars, but like just like following the award shows. I think that's kind of like how it'll play out. But maybe I'm leaning a little more Sinners just because, I'd love to see Ryan Coogler take that Best Picture. But I also love Frank. I'm a huge Guillermo del Toro fan. I wouldn't put it as my number one, but it's in my top 5, Frankenstein. So, but he's also not nominated for director this year, which I thought was a little crazy. But I
mean, you end up with some weirdnesses with only 5 director slots and 10 Best Picture
10 films, exactly. Like, how do you do this?
for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, with screenplay, I was thinking about that too, because you look at a film like Get Out a few years ago, which I think, was a genre film generating a similar level of buzz and excitement. And that's eventually where it was mainly rewarded. Now, Sinners is a lot more nominations than Get Out did. But I think, it's a thing where those of us who love genre films are sometimes like, well, it's well written. So for sure. I'll also, while we're here, shout out one of my favorites of the year that didn't get a nomination because I'm hosting and no one can stop me. But I really loved Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind with Josh O'Connor.
I didn't get to see it. I love Kelly Reichardt, so but I didn't get to see that yet. Yeah.
Real strong recommendation. And Josh O'Connor, who stars in it, is quickly becoming one of my favorite film actors. Like, he was great in the Knives Out movie this year.
I was going to say, he was great in the Knives Out film this year.
Yeah, but it's for people who aren't familiar with her work more broadly, it's sort of contemplative and sometimes a little bit sort of slower paced, but I think really dives deep into some really interesting themes. And this is kind of a deconstruction of a heist film, which is a genre I love the more Hollywood glitzy version of. So it was really made for me, I think.
Yeah, she definitely does like the slow burn thing, which I love. I have no issue with, I think. But and she comes from a real like indie background. I was really dying to see that. I didn't get to it, but she did a film in the 2000s called Wendy and Lucy that I loved, and also Meek Cutoff, which was like her Western. But I have to get to that. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm excited to see that one.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, I think, regardless of who wins when the Oscars come, great year for film. Lots of good stuff in 2025 and lots of good stuff coming up, I hope, in 2026. Lots of stuff I'm excited about. So Joe, as well as our regular listeners, that I like to end the episode by handing things over to my guests to finish. So before we wrap up here today, either about your experiences or about the Oscars or film in general, did you just have any final thoughts to leave our listeners with today?
My final thought is don't watch Avatar on your cell phone.
Co-signed. The official position of something personal.
No, just as a film lover, I want to say get back to the theaters, everybody. I think it's the way to see a movie is on the big screen, and then you see it at home. Right? I love owning films and watching them at home. I've done the whole 4K switch. I've built a little theater room in the basement. Nice. But I see it on the big screen first, just as someone who has just grown up very passionate about it. My uncle said he would always say, I always knew you guys would love films because when you were very young, probably like 5 or 6 or something, he was like, this film came on, The Strawberry Blonde with James Cagney, and he was like, you guys were captivated by it. And he was like, I don't know any 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds who would want to sit down and watch this old black and white movie. He was like, so I remember that to this day, that he was like, that's how I knew you guys would. But one, go see movies in theaters, and 2, keep listening to Something Personal. So we're gonna have some really cool stuff coming for season 4.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the plug, and thanks for your time. I could sit here and talk about movies with you for much longer, but we'll wrap for today. And I hope our listeners enjoyed getting a little peek behind the scenes of Something Personal. Something Personal is a production of Palisades Hudson Financial Group, a financial planning and investment firm headquartered in South Florida. Our other offices are in Atlanta, Austin, the Portland, Oregon metropolitan area, and the New York City metro area. Something Personal is hosted by me, Amy Laburda. Our producers are Ali Elkin and Joseph Ranghelli. Joseph Ranghelli is also our director, editor, and mixer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us wherever you're listening. It's a simple way to help new listeners find the show, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you.